Hi folks, Glyn Dewis here again with another Photoshop tutorial for you. And in fact today what I want to do is show you two techniques that I use in Photoshop for brightening and colouring eyes. Now on the screen at the minute we can see the finished image, but out of camera it looked like this, where we had to do quite a bit of work on the background, removing dust spots, putting in a new background, and then on our model Lucy we did things like removing blemishes, adding contrast to the skin softening, and so on and so forth. But like I said, today all we're going to concentrate on is the eyes, and in fact all we're going to look at doing is brightening and colouring the eyes. So let's have a look at the two techniques that I use. Well, both techniques make use of, first of all, of something called the quick mask. Now on the left hand side of our screen, at the very bottom with the toolbar, we have the quick mask, and if I double click on that, it first of all brings up this dialog box here. Now by default you'll notice that it will say a little dot is next to where it says masked areas, but what I want to do is change that so it says selected areas. So I'll put my cursor, a little dab it in there, so now selected areas is selected, and we click OK. And all I'm going to do then is get a brush by pressing B on my keyboard, and then making sure that my foreground colour is set to black. I'm then going to select the quick mask by just tapping on it at the bottom of the toolbar. You can also press Q on your keyboard as a bit of a shortcut. Next thing I'm going to do then is just zoom into the eyes, and then using my left and right bracket keys I'm going to change the size of the cursor just to paint in where I want to make my selection. So now where we see this red overlay appearing is where the area that I'm selecting is going to be. So I'm just going to paint around just where you get the colour of the eyes, just in here, and I'll keep it just within the boundaries there. If I go too far like I have at the top here, if I just change the foreground colour to white instead of black, and then I can just paint that away like so. Change it back to black and we'll do the other eye. Again, we're just painting in here just within the boundaries, not going over the actual iris itself, like so. There we go. Just to leave a little bit on the outside. I've gone a bit too far there, so again change my foreground colour to white, and we'll just remove where we don't want it. Okay, now once I've done that, we've got these red devil eyes here. If I now press Q, we can then see the marching ants to reveal where we've made our selection. Now what I want to do, I wouldn't normally do this, but just because we're going to go through two techniques, I'm going to save that selection to save me having to do it again for the next technique that I show you. So all I'm going to do is go to Select and Save Selection, and we'll just call that Eyes. Now don't have to worry yourself. Oops, Select, Save Selection, and we'll call it Eyes and click OK. You don't have to worry about that. Like I said, this is purely because I'm going to show you another technique as well. Anyway, so now we have our eyes selected, the part that we want selected. The first technique, what we can do is we can use something called a selective colour adjustment, and that's over here in our adjustments over here on the right hand side of the screen. So if I now tap on selective colour, it brings up this dialog here. A couple of things we need to do. The first one at the top where it says colours, by default it will have reds selected. If I now change that to neutrals, okay, nothing happens. But then I come down to my layers panel, and where it has my selective colour adjustment layer here, if I now change the blend mode of that to linear dodge, and in brackets where it says add, so linear dodge, add, and straight away we can see the eyes get brightened up. Now yes, that's too much, but we can sort that out in a minute. But the clever thing now is, because we changed it to neutrals at the very top, using these sliders we can now just play around to our heart's content and change the colour of the eyes. So we can bring them across, a bit more blue in there, just change it down. In fact, let's go for a nice blue eyes like that. But again, it's, you know, clearly that's way too much. But if we now zoom out a little bit, okay, and because our selective colour adjustment layer is, as it says on a layer, we can now use opacity, and we can just drag that down to, say, let's have a look, somewhere around 40 to 50. Let's keep it simple, let's go for around about 45, 46. So now if I turn that on and off, that layer on and off, we can see where we've gone very quickly from having quite dull eyes with no colour that we can really see, to with one layer we can get that much more impact on the eyes. So that's one of the techniques, using the selective colour adjustment layer. So we'll just get rid of that. So technique number two, first of all then let's just say we've just made our selection of our eyes, so I'll just load that in. And let's have a look, eyes, and we'll click OK. So there's my eyes that have been selected. Now the next technique, all that needs to do is again going over to our adjustments, and at the top here we've got one that's got like a plus and a minus, and that's an exposure adjustment layer. If we click on that, we get the exposure adjustment layer dialog box, and at the very top, the top slider is exposure, and as you'd expect, if we increase it, we're going to brighten the eyes, and if we decrease it, we're going to darken the eyes. So let's go for something around about 2-ish, something like 2, about 1.99, there you go. So turn that on and off, we can see it's nice and made a nice big change in the brightness to the eyes there. Now, if we wanted to, we could now change the colour of the eyes. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key, and I'm going to actually click on this layer mask, like so. And you'll see now that's made the selection of the eyes there active again. I'm then going to do something like, let's say, a hue and saturation adjustment. I'll put a tick in the colour eyes box, and now when I use the hue slider, we can see that we can again affect the colour of the eyes. Now the only difference with this technique is that obviously to do this, we've ended up with 2 layers. We've got first of all, we've got the exposure adjustment layer, and then we've got the hue and saturation for the colour. So now if we want to tone it down a little bit so they're not so bright and not so blue, we need to put these into a group. So at the moment we can see the hue and saturation layer is active. If I hold down my shift key and now click on the exposure layer there, they're both active. Then if I click on the little arrow at the very top right hand corner of my layers panel, and it says new group from layers, and we'll call that eyes, that puts both of those adjustments into a little group here. And the advantage of that is I can now adjust the opacity of that entire group. And we'll just bring that down to around about 45 to 50. And again, yep, we're going for the 46, something about 46. And so now we can turn that group on and off, and we can see the differences that makes. So that's what we've got for you today. 2 techniques, really simple as you can see. Use whichever one you prefer, but nice, simple ways of brightening and then colouring the eyes. I'll see you next time.